right, let's get started. My name is Serena Canelake. I'm here with Fanil Patel. We are both members of the TCRL engineering team, and we are here today to talk about documentation. So before we get going, I'd love a show of hands. How many people in this group would consider themselves developers, writing code, etc.? All right, it's a good number. And how many of you would consider yourself, well, we're going to say content experts, not developers, but you know a whole lot about the open edX world? Well, so like, I guess the differentiation I mean is, do you have a local dev setup in which to write the docs, or are you going to be writing the docs more in like a visual editor? Maybe you don't know what a local dev environment is. Yeah.
If I said make a virtual environment, how many of you would know what to do? Okay, cool. At some point, we're going to separate you guys from the other guys.
That was an excellent. So that differentiation, I'm going to say developers and I'm going to say content experts. And those are the two groups that I mean. So when I say those words throughout this presentation, keep that distinction in mind. So we are doing a 2-track tutorial today based on what persona you are. So if you're a developer, we're going to be doing an introduction to what our documentation is, what Diataxis is, talk about ReStructured Text, and then do some setup practice and pull requests. For content experts, we're actually going to share the first 2 items. So we're going to do that all together. We're going to break out and talk a little bit more about what GitHub is, which is where we store our docs, talk about what pull requests are, go through like some more step-by-step instructions to learn some RST, and then get to the same point, which is let's write some stuff. All right, I'm going to stop here for a second. If you have not signed the Open edX CLA, please pull out your laptop or your phone and do so now. A CLA is a contributor license agreement, and it gives TCRL the rights to redistribute your code. And this is important because we are an open source project under the AGPL license. And we want to make sure that everyone who contributes understands that everything they contribute is going to go out under this license. But actually the docs are under Creative Commons. So it's the same principle still applies. If you work at 2U, you're already in the CLA database. All right. Does everybody at least have that process start going? Grab that URL. All right. Excellent. Thank you. So I'm going to hand it over to Fanil to do a introduction.
All right. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about Diataxis and a little bit about RST. Just a quick raise of hands. How many people have heard of Diataxis before? Cool. No worries. So Diataxis is actually it's a blank slide on purpose. Don't worry. Diataxis is actually a framework for how to organize your documentation. It's been becoming more and more popular in open source projects. And you'll see sort of how it's oriented. In Diataxis, there's sort of 2 axes to think about. The first being sort of this idea of practical versus theoretical knowledge. So like when you need to get things done, you don't really care as much about how things work as much as what buttons you need to click to get the thing you want done. But when you're trying to understand things, you really care about how are things put together, why are they put together that way. So that's one axis of sort of thinking about your documentation. And the other is sort of what's useful when studying versus what's useful when you're working. So studying being, you may care about a list of what are all the functions I can call if you're working, but you may care about sort of like, what was the reason behind using this underlying framework for Python? Like why do we use Django if you're studying and you're trying to understand sort of the motivations? So with these 4 things, we end up with these 4 quadrants. And with Diataxis, the idea is that we organize our documentation into these 4 quadrants. So tutorials being a learning-oriented practical thing, right? You're doing things with the goal of learning. So it's very practical. You're pushing buttons, you're getting instructions for exact things to do with the idea that that practice will help you understand how to do a thing. But tutorials won't necessarily, like they don't necessarily have to produce a practical real world, like production grade output. The idea is to get yourself familiar with the tools and to like learn how to use the tools. So like in woodworking, this would be like, if you've never used a saw before, you're going to cut some pieces of wood. Are they going to be the right lengths? Doesn't matter. The idea is to practice the actual cutting process. Explanations. So this is going to be things like why we made things a certain way, diagrams of how things are put together, thinking about sort of like what the high level approach is for something. Those can be really useful when you are ready to sort of dive deep into something, but often aren't very useful when we're trying to just get things working. So they also end up on this studying side of things. So like when we're seeking understanding. And on the other side, there's how-to guides, which is practical steps for when you're trying to get work done, right? Like, how do I enable this thing? You don't really care that like, in order to build this feature, we first had to do a bunch of UX research, and then we decided between these three things. And after that, we picked this one thing based on this test we did. You just want to know that you go to this page and you toggle this one button, and then you're done. So how-to guides are sort of meant to focus you in on just what do you need to know to accomplish the tasks at hand, with the idea that that will get you going with the work you need to do right away. And the last section is references. So references you can think of on the coding side, you can think of things like the documentation generated from your class definitions, any docs that are built into your code. From an content perspective, you could think of it essentially like, say, a list of X blocks would be a reference of like, what are all the possible X blocks I could use in here? And what are the settings that I can twiddle on them that I have options to work with? So it would be sort of a comprehensive way of looking at sort of information. And it's really useful when you already know your way around, but you're like, what is that parameter I need to use to make this do the thing I want to do? And you need to remember that last little bit of information. So using these four areas as how we organize documentation is the Diataxis approach. This is the approach that we are taking with the Open edX documentation, and it's the direction we're moving in. Not everything is here yet, and like I would love all of your help to sort of keep us moving in that direction, but the goal is to move into this direction. So far, we've managed, as we exercised this framework and tried to figure out, are there things that this doesn't do for us? Is there a piece of documentation we need that doesn't fit into this? There are always pieces of documentation people expect, like I want it to be written like this because that's how my brain works. But in terms of thinking about how to make it approachable to others, we found that most things do tend to fit into these buckets, and these buckets, once understood, help people find the things they're looking for more easily. So discoverability being one of the bigger challenges around documentation for Open edX, this is the approach we've decided to take here. With that said, the other piece we're going to be so that is your concepts, right? That is the concepts part of this. The practical side of that is that we use RST, which is a language that lets you specify formatting. So you write text, it makes things prettier, but it is a language. You do need to understand its syntax. It has behaviors. Those behaviors produce pretty pictures on people's screens that let them more easily understand the information. So here's a small example of this, which is on the left-hand side, you'll see where it says, PyTest in PyCharm. That's a title that gets nice and big over here. There's links in here that become hyperlinks that you can click through. There are admonitions. So this is an important piece of text, so that gets highlighted on the right-hand side. RST lets you do this and a lot more. We use it because it has a bunch of really useful features. It has pretty strong Python and JS integration. The JS integration is not something we're using yet, but look, we've been starting to study it a little bit more to sort of figure out if that's a good option for us. It has a bunch of built-in advanced components, some of which we'll talk about later when you guys are doing some practical work. And then it has an extensions framework and ecosystem that's fairly robust, and there are a lot of open source extensions that make it easy to extend and improve and add features you want to add. And in fact, some people in our community have written some extensions for RST and Sphinx. Sphinx is, I'll mention here, I often use Sphinx and RST interchangeably. Sphinx is the name of the particular flavor of RST that we use. RST is a specification for the language. Sphinx is the library that we use to turn that text into the pretty thing we want. So Sphinx RST together is often a great thing to sort of look for if you're trying to learn more things. So with that, let's go into some super basic syntax. Here we've got RST on the left and the rendered text on the right. So you can pretty easily make italicized or bold text, simple formatting, things like that. You can make lists, numeric lists, links. And since this is a tutorial, like if you guys have questions while we're going, please just like raise your hand. Just all I ask is like raise them here, not here, because it's harder to see when everybody's sitting down. So yeah, if you have questions, please stop me. With that, next thing I'll talk about is headers. So you saw that there was a header. RST supports many levels of headers. The way that headers work is that different header underlining features result in different headers. There's a lot of different ways to do this. In the Open edX system, this order is the order you need to know. And the easiest way to remember this is that the biggest header has 4 lines. The hash mark has 4 lines. The next one has 3 lines, right? The star has 3 lines. The equal has 2 lines, and then the header 4 has 1 line. So it's 4, 3, 2, 1. Easy to remember. And that is the way that we are going to make everything be as we move the documentation into the new system. So this is how headers work. For those on the developer side, they know that Sphinx actually is unopinionated about which things should be used for headers. And so lots of people have done lots of different things. This is the only thing we're going to do. So next, I want to talk about a couple more complex things. So you saw some basic syntax, which will let you sort of make things prettier or make things bigger, smaller. Sphinx also has this notion called directives. Excuse me. Directives are essentially little extra structured markup that you put in your code. And they let you expose and access all of those extensions I was talking about earlier. So a thing that you might want to do is if you've written multiple files is you might want a table of contents that goes over all your files. And so Serena is passing out right now a little cheat sheet with all of the syntax that we're going through. So if I'm moving through the visuals too fast, don't worry. You've got something in front of you that you can look at. So yeah, directives. So here on the left, you'll see a directive. This is a talk tree directive. I'm using it with this extra argument called glob. What glob does, it says, if I put a star in here, I mean everything in this directory. So with this, what I can, in this file, I can say, okay, list me all of the other files that are in this directory in a table of contents. Great. And so like with this little simple bit of code on the left, I can produce a bulleted list of all of the other files that are here and all of the subsections that are in those files. So directives can be very powerful. They can take sort of small bits of like what you're expressing and produce really useful content out of it. They can also be used to do things like extract the documentation out of your code and display it somewhere else along with other things. So here is another directive. And this directive is a code directive, which we use pretty regularly if we want to have code examples in our documentation. Here, same, starts with 2 dots, then the name of the directive, and then the content below it. This one doesn't have any arguments, you notice. So it's a bit simpler, but again, it takes a bunch of syntax on the left, produces something more beautiful on the right. But things don't always go the way we want, right? If you are writing RST, things are going to go wrong. There's a lot of intuition that you end up building over time. And our goal with the practice you're going to do later is to help you build some of that intuition. But if you, because it exposes so many advanced features, there are places that don't quite make sense. So when things don't make sense, don't worry. This is what an error looks like. You have now all seen an error. It is not too scary. It will tell you, the first part of this you'll notice is the exact file where the error is, and the line number where it thinks the error is, and then the actual error text. This makes it fairly Googleable. You can find other examples of things like this that other people might have experienced if you run into something that looks weird and hard to read for you. In this case, you can see this one's pretty straightforward. It doesn't know what this directive type is, tick tree. And it's because I meant to type talk tree and I just mistyped it. And it's a pretty easy fix, but I can see the error, I can see the lines where it thinks the issue is, and I can go fix it. So if you see errors, fear not, it's not the end of the world. And with that said, as you are writing documentation for the Open edX project and you run into issues, and if you see errors or can't find where the error is or don't understand, please reach out to us. I'll drop my GitHub username in here later, but it's easy. It's just my first name. So if you know how to spell my first name, you know how to get in touch with me. And same with Serena. And so either of us can help you if you are running into issues as you're building documentation, because like if people are learning, there's going to be mistakes. So don't worry too much about it. Here's some helpful resources. The top link here is a quick reference that we wrote, most of which is distilled onto the pieces of paper that you have in front of you. The bottom link is the RST primer in the Sphinx documentation, which is the library I mentioned that we're using to actually generate our output. And that's a great place if you are looking to go deeper and learn more about what's possible. And of course, you can Google things. It still works. I don't think ChatGPT has destroyed Google fully yet, but you could probably also ask ChatGPT if you wanted to. And with that, we are going to start the next section.
Hey, everybody. So for people in this room, you are going to have to get up and physically move. If you know what a virtual environment is, you're going to the back of the room. If you do not know what a virtual environment is, or if you know what it is, but you don't know how to set one up, come up to the front of the room. So the people who are in that content experts group, we're going to be using the slides. And I'm like, don't want to shout. So I want Fanil to be able to talk to the developers. So let's get cozy in two separate groups.
Hi, everybody. I'm here with the part of the Docs tutorials that is aimed at content experts. So if you are new to GitHub or want some refreshers of what a pull request is, this is the place to be. Yeah, so to begin, we're going to go through an introduction to GitHub pull requests and then go through a little bit of a documentation tutorial. So to begin with, I want to explain what GitHub is. I think GitHub can seem like a pretty challenging concept, but it's really not. It's just like Google Drive or Dropbox. It's a place where people write, save, and share their code online. So it looks a little bit different. It looks maybe a little bit more techy, but it's actually something you've seen before. So if you've got a file system on your computer, so if you've got a Mac, you can go open Finder. And Finder has a bunch of folders, and inside each folder, there's another folder. There might be files in that folder, and it just kind of goes deeper and deeper and deeper. So if we look here, this is a Finder of my computer. There is in the middle column highlighted a folder called docs.openedx.org. And inside that folder, there are some files and there are some other folders. And in GitHub terms, docs.openedx.org is a repository or a repo. So it's basically just a big folder and it holds a bunch of code and other types of files. So as you can see actually on the far right of the Finder view and in the view of the repo, it's the same files. So that's basically all a repository is. So how do you make changes? This may be something that you've done before in Google Docs. So this is a screenshot from Google Docs where I am requesting a change to the text. I have highlighted some text, deleted it. I've made some suggestions on my own. So everything that I've done is in green on this file. This is like very visual and kind of, I think, makes a lot of sense. On GitHub, you request changes using what is called a pull request, and it might look a little different, but it acts pretty much the same way. So this is a screenshot from pull request I made recently. And at the bottom of the pull request, there is a file that I wanted to make changes to. The line in red is the line that I would like to get rid of or change. So that line at the bottom that begins with a minus sign highlighted in red. So that's the line of code or the line of documentation where I'm like, I think there needs to be a change here. The line below that in green with a plus sign is my suggestion, my proposed change for what should be changed in the above line. So in this case, I am making a suggested change that the URL have HTTPS in front of it. And that's it. That's what a pull request is. It's just a way to request changes. All right, so we're going to put some of this knowledge into practice. First off, if you don't have a GitHub account, visit github.com and make an account. It's pretty quick and painless. The next step is to go through the first pull request tutorial that we've made on the docs.openedx.org site. So there's a tiny URL here, tinyurl.com/first-pr-tutorial. You can pause the video here and we'll be back when you're done with that tutorial. Welcome back. So the next step we're going to go through is practicing a little bit of RST. So Fanil said at the beginning of our time together that RST stands for ReStructured Text. It is a way of writing visual formatting of text in text itself. It may take a little bit to learn it, but once you've got it, it'll be really easy to do. So what I want you to do for this part is to go to tinyurl.com/rst-101. That will bring you to a GitHub repository that is filled with 5 exercises. So for each exercise, you're going to click the exercise, you're going to click edit, and you're going to follow the instructions. You can use the preview tab to preview your work. So read the README files. So that is every time you click into a folder, when you scroll down, there will be some text, and reading that text is going to be really helpful as you go about each exercises. Unlike the last exercise, you don't need to make pull requests for your changes. If you do, they will also just be closed, but I will take a look at them. So go ahead and try out these exercises, and we'll be here when you're done with that. Hey, welcome back. And we're on to our last part of the tutorial, which is actually doing some documentation tasks. We're really looking forward to seeing what all of you guys have to add to the documentation. It's going to be awesome. So before continuing, one note is that you're going to need to sign a CLA or a contributor license agreement to contribute documentation to this project. And the reason for that is that we as Axum relicense your work underneath licenses such as AGPL v3 and Creative Commons. So this just affirms that you're okay with your work being licensed under those terms. So if you haven't signed that, please do sign up at openedx.org/CLA and be sure to provide the GitHub username that you're going to be using to make changes. All right, on to our exercises. Let's fix the docs. There are a number of doc sites that we can edit. So if you visit docs.edx.org, there are 3 guides. If you click on course teams and then building and running a course, that guide is editable. If you click on researchers, both the edX research guide and the using edX insights guide are editable. There are other pages on docs.edx.org that we cannot edit. So just focus on looking at these ones. Additionally, anything on docs.openedx.org is editable by you. And what we're looking for you guys to do is to find some pages that you're knowledgeable about. Maybe they're pages that you've seen typos on, or that you know some facts are missing. There's new functionality that's not been documented, or there's existing functionality and recent updates has made the way that you interact with that different. All of these things you guys know well, and so find those pages and click the edit on GitHub button and perform the edits just like we've been doing in the previous exercises. And when you're done, make a pull request. You can tag me, you can tag Fanil, and we will get it reviewed. One thing that I want to make note of is that if you're editing docs in the edX documentation repo, so this repo holds all the files that are on those docs.edx.org sites. Sometimes you'll go to edit a file and it'll look like this. It'll look weird. It'll say include, and then it'll say what is called a path to a file. So a collection of folders and then a file name that says where the actual text is held. So there are two ways to find this file, because if you wanted to edit, if you were at this page, you would want to edit that file that is specified in the include. So in the top left-hand corner of this page, it's not shown in this screenshot, but it's there. There's a search bar, and you can search for the name of the file. You can search for checkbox.rst. You can find it and you can edit it there. That's probably the easiest way to go. You can also try to find the folder that contains the file you're looking for. So you're looking for a folder called shared. And if you click on en_us in the top bar of the screenshot, you'll be brought to a folder that contains a lot of other folders, one of which is shared. You can click into the shared folder and see the exercises _ tool folders, and you can click into that folder and get to the checkbox.rst file. So two different ways of kind of like moving around and finding files that you're looking for. All right, so with this, get going on trying to find some documentation that you can make edits to. Please make a PR, please review other PRs. We definitely want your expertise. And to wrap up, thank you so much for attending this tutorial. Go forth and write your docs. And you can find us online in a few places. The documentation chat room in the Open edX Slack is a place where you can find us for quick questions. You can email Fanil@axum.org. You can email me, Serena@axum.org. And you can find us on GitHub. Fanil's @Fanil and I'm @Serena. You can tag us with any questions. You can tag us for review. We really look forward to seeing you online. Thank you very much.